Hey guys, Hashi here. Today I wanted to cover some new lore about Alpha Primus from the new Cawl book Archmagos. For those who don't know, Belisarius Cawl, the man tasked by the Primarch of the Ultramarines, Rabute Guilliman, to make the Primaris Marines, has his own, how should we call it, pet project marine named Alpha Primus. Unlike other Marines, he wears no heraldry and seemingly has no gene sire. Many people speculate that he is the sort of Primarch to the Primaris, however that isn't exactly true as we will go over in this video. So in the limited, or as we in the fandom should really call it, the Scalpers edition of Archmagos, we are given a short story called 5 Questions, in which the Primaris Marine Alpha Primus captures a demon and makes it answer 5 questions for him. These questions were advertised on Warhammer Community as questions that Cawl wouldn't answer. The first question asked is, "What am I?" To which the demon replies, the first, a template, an experiment, a mistake, a success, a failure, an offshoot, a shameful secret, a beloved work. Now the template thing may spark some reaction, but I beg of you to hold your horses. Let's start with Primus being the first. We have known that Primus was the first of his kind for some while, like in Dawn of Fire Avenging Sun, where it is explained that he had been told he was the first. But, because he was fully mature and watched all of the other Primaris Marines being born, and since he can do things they cannot, he suspects that he is not in fact truly a Primaris Marine, but something different. For example, in a pretty cold one-liner from the book The Great Work, Primus says that the Emperor gave Marines many gifts, but Primus was given more than most. This was in regards to his psychic potential and his ability to hide it. Now in Genefather, when showcasing his psychic abilities, Fabius Bile would remark about the Cyclops, or Magnus the Red. And to speak as one, we are told that Primus had been rewritten on a genetic level, and in the Great Work we are shown that he is a quite bit stronger than the average Marine. Now hang on to that in the offshoot line because we have some other things we're going to talk about first. I know I'm asking you guys to hang on to a lot of juicy lore, but just wait a minute. At the end of the video, it will all make sense. Trust me. The next question Primus asks is if Cawl is his father. To this, the demon responds, in flesh and in effort. This is something that is consistent with what we were told in Genefather, where a panicked Cawl says to Bile that Primus is made from himself, and in his gene code, Cawl will live on. Now, to contextualize this more, we should look at what Cawl says in the Archmagos book proper in regards to him possibly dying by, checks notes, going into a black hole and onto a Necron world engine frozen in time. What Cawl explains is that reconstituting all of his consciousness and knowledge from the various banks aboard his ship would be dangerously close to an abominable intelligence, and that he would never do something like that. Wink. Now, I don't think that Primus is a vessel for Cawl, but moreover the living proof of concept so that the Primaris will never degrade as much as the Firstborn have. Bile supports this notion by saying that everything he would need from the Sing Primus Portum is in Alpha Primus. We have seen that the Primaris procedure is slightly dependent on who is performing it in Darkness in the Blood, where fucking hell, I never know how to pronounce this guy's name. Quavo? Like, seriously, I read the books, I don't listen to the audiobooks. If you guys have an idea how you actually pronounce it, you tell me. But, he explains the risks regarding the procedure and how it's been improved by Cawl. And then, in The Silent King, which actually takes place beforehand, Maecenas is given the Primaris procedure by none other than Cawl himself, and Cawl kind of jokes about giving him an upgrade. The third question Alpha Primus asks is which Primarch's Geneseed was used to make him? To which the demon responds, none of them. Alpha Primus is surprised by this and ponders what exactly he could be, as even he thought he was a chimera, using genetic material from different sources. Primus goes on to reflect on the rumors about him being a Primarch, and how another Primarch could never roam the galaxy because the information to make the Immortus gland was missing from the Sing Primus Portum. The chimera rumor seems to be a real rumor, as we see in the Great Work from Felix, who says it matter-of-factually. In Genefather, Cawl says that the information to create an exact copy of the Primarchs was deliberately destroyed by the Emperor, but only so much so that a great genius could piece it back together should the need ever arise. The Guilliman inferior calls this blasphemy, but Cawl rightfully says that Guilliman would never say that. This would be in line with what the Emperor said to Cawl in the Great Work about if Cawl would ever betray the Emperor. Now later on in Genefather, when Bile says that he suspects there's a reason Cawl never told Guilliman about Primus, and it's because he's done something like merging many gene lines, and that he sees the potential in it, but he truly doesn't know what Primus is. So he asks Cawl to explain, and all Cawl says is that he's his son. This is kind of funny, since in Genefather, Cawl debates Guilliman Inferior about the Primarchs not having a father, although he does agree that he is more of Guilliman's father than the Emperor would be. We do see Guilliman's reaction to a report about Alpha Primus and Avenging Sun. The Primarch explains that he is not surprised Cawl would do something like this and that he doesn't want to see the monsters Cawl has locked away. He then asks if Primus was a concern, to which Messinius says no. As for the other gene lines idea, very famously Cawl Inferior does bug Guilliman about using other gene lines in Dark Imperium. Guilliman says no despite the reasoning Cawl Inferior provides. In Gene Father, when we see the other side of this conversation, we never see Call's response to Guilliman on this matter. It should be noted that the conversation was solely about putting the other gene lines into full production, and in the Great Work we hear that Guilliman doesn't really care that Cawl experimented with other gene lines. The fourth question Primus asks is if he is a Primarch. The demon retorts that the Sons of the Emperor are too much spirit and little flesh, and what is a nightmare if not the same? The spirit and flesh thing is something we already sort of knew, and I talked about it in my Scattering of the Primarchs video, but the Primarchs are very obviously aspects of the Emperor that he gained the power to share from Molech. This is supported by false gods asking why not make 20 Horuses. In Saturnine, when Erda explains that the Emperor came back from Molech with much more power, and in The End in the Death Volume 3 where we see the Emperor draw the aspects back into himself. This should not be news to anyone. I should note as well that in False Gods, when Horus is brought aboard his ship for medical attention, his legion has no idea what to do, because Primarch biology is so far beyond what a normal Marine is. So it would stand to question that Bile, someone who has perfectly cloned the Primarchs according to Gene Father, would have known if Primus was truly a Primarch. The fifth and final question asked by Alpha Primus is, am I a nightmare like them? The demon then replies, you are a shadow, they are the darkness. To this I really don't have much lore to add on, as the Emperor is usually depicted as light when viewed by demons, like the famous in the Sunless Realm the sun rose at last from Master of Mankind. But if I were to speculate, we could view it in a different light, pun intended. So this could mean that Alpha Primus is but a derivative of the Primarchs, which would be true, but it could also mean that Alpha Primus is being shaped by another force, like what casts the shadow in this metaphor. Would this outside force be Cawl, or would it be something else we aren't aware of yet? In the Great Work, Alpha Primus does say that his soul is shackled by Call's ideals, but I think this is more metaphorical. I do think the interpretation of the Darkness line that Primus participates in the same ideas as the Primarchs is the most consistent currently, and I don't think the Gifts quote contradicts the multiple gene line quote either. I think rather than being a fusion of multiple gene lines, Alpha Primus is instead made with Call's formulation of pre-Legion Division Geneseed. See, in Saturnine we are told about Li 2, a pre-division Astartes that was given to Erda to protect her. Now, Li 2 is never said to be particularly strong, and that's why I think Alpha Primus gets the Primarch rumors on the Shadow statement, because he is particularly strong. And when you are the seemingly one-off made quote-unquote Astartes that is particularly strong and with many gifts from seemingly alternate legions, it seems to look like you might just be a Primarch. But as we know, Alpha Primus is not a Primarch. I think he is more of a master mold for Primaris. This is almost exactly what is described in the Horus Heresy Black Book Crusade, where prototype legionaries are described as potent and a bridge between the Primarch and their legion. Now the book also does go on to say a lot of them were made with the Lion's Geneseed, but as we can see with Li 2, it isn't the case. We also see something similar in Deliverance Lost, where Korax finds the pre-division genetic material. This would make Primus categorically a prototype undivided Primaris Marine. I say undivided because the Geneseed division had already happened when Primus was made. This explains the offshoot line from the first question. He is an offshoot of the Astartes project. Unlike the Primarchs, which directly led to their legions, Alpha Primus doesn't quite lead to anything. This would explain why in Gene Father we see that Alpha Primus still has his Geneseed. Alpha Primus was never intended to sire a new legion of Marines. He was a one-off, a proof of concept if you will. This is also why Alpha Primus was made on a genetic level instead of making proprietary Geneseed from him. He is not meant to be replicated. This, along with his loyalty, is also why Guilliman isn't really concerned about him. He is just one Marine. I think another question this begs is what legion was the Emperor promising Magnus in Fury of Magnus? My theory has been that it was the Grey Knights, since the Grey Knights were already in training on Titan at this point as we saw in the Buried Dagger. However, another theory I've had is that it was Primaris because he had already talked to Cawl at this point and told Cawl anything he would do would be fine. I do also think it is fine to say that the Cyclops comment from Bile would indicate that Primaris' Thousand Sons would not suffer from the flesh change. much. But at this point we are speculating on a one-off comment and trying to relate it back to a wholly unrelated Marine. Or I guess he is kind of related since he is undivided Geneseed now, isn't he? Yeah, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys all in the next video.